welcome to this explainer. Look, we are going to jump right into it today because we're tackling a topic that is incredibly important, but honestly, kind of terrifying for a lot of us. We're diving deep into the world of building trust. And if you think about it, trust is literally the foundation, the bedrock of every single meaningful connection in our lives. We're talking about navigating high-stakes projects at work, building lifelong, ride-or-die friendships, and obviously sharing our lives in deep romantic relationships. You just can't do any of those things without trust. Yet, despite knowing how absolutely vital it is for our well-being, so many of us struggle. We constantly ask ourselves, when should I trust? How do I even do it? And most importantly, who is actually safe to trust? And hey, it makes total sense why we feel this way. With modern digital communication, endless social media, and just this growing sense of isolation out there, trying to figure out people's true intentions feels way more confusing today than it ever has before. But there's good news. Based on some absolutely fascinating recent research and a really practical framework, we are going to unpack actionable, real-world strategies. We're going to help you develop healthier trust patterns, protect yourself from potential harm, and ultimately transform trust from this persistent source of anxiety into a major personal strength. Let's get into it.
74%. I really want you to let that staggering number sink in for a second. 74% of people report having trust issues in their key relationships. To put that into perspective, if you were standing in a crowded room of 10 people, 7 of them, maybe even 8, are walking around right now with their guards up. They are double-guessing motives or quietly sitting there just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So what does this actually mean for you? Well, it means that if you find trusting difficult, or if you ever feel like you're somehow uniquely broken because you struggled to open up to people, you are absolutely not alone. There's no way. It is a nearly universal modern experience. Feeling hesitant is the rule right now. It is not the exception. And honestly, simply acknowledging that shared human experience, just knowing we're all in this boat together, is the very first step toward actually making a change.
Because, you see, the hesitation we feel, it isn't just paranoia. We aren't just making things up in our heads. It is based on hard data and very real lived experiences. According to Gallup, an overwhelming 62% of adults have experienced a betrayal by someone close to them. And we really have to remember here, betrayal isn't always some dramatic movie villain plot where someone steals your life savings and flees the country. Most of the time, betrayal looks like the small stuff. It's broken promises. It's a friend taking a secret you told them in confidence and sharing it as gossip. Or it's a partner being wildly inconsistent with their emotional support when you need them most. Because of those everyday grinding letdowns, 78% of people say they think twice before trusting someone new after being hurt. And for 43% of individuals, those past betrayals are actively influencing and negatively impacting their current, day-to-day relationships. So we aren't just imagining the risk out there, we are carrying the very real, very heavy weight of past letdowns.
So, now that we've totally validated exactly why trust is so incredibly hard for most of us, here is our roadmap for the rest of today's explainer. We're going to hit 5 main areas. 1. The trust dilemma. 2. The science of connection. 3. Warning signs and red flags. 4. 5 steps to safer trust. And 5. Trust in the real world.
Okay, let's dive right into this first section, the trust dilemma, and unpack the biological roots of our hesitation.
If there is one single thing you take away from this entire explainer, please let it be this. Your reluctance to trust is not a character flaw at all. It's actually a highly adaptive, totally brilliant response from a tiny part of your brain called the amygdala. Think of your amygdala as your brain's prehistoric, built-in alarm system. Thousands of years ago, it evolved to keep our ancestors from getting eaten by predators. But today, well, there aren't many saber-toothed tigers running around. So, your amygdala treats a potential broken heart, the fear of social embarrassment, or that gossiping coworker with the exact same biological alarm bells as a physical life or death threat. When you've experienced early betrayals or inconsistent caregiving in your life, it carves these really deep neural pathways in your head. Your primitive brain literally learns a simple equation. Vulnerability equals danger. So, when you feel hesitant to open up or your chest gets tight when someone asks you to trust them, that's just your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's prioritizing your survival and working overtime to keep you safe from perceived emotional threats.
Moving on to Section 2, the science of connection. Let's look at the flip side of that fear.
Since our brains are literally wired to protect us and keep those defensive walls super high, you might be wondering, well, why bother? Why go through the massive, terrifying effort of crossing that bridge to trust someone new? Well, it turns out overriding that biological fear rewards us in 4 incredible, distinct ways. Psychologically, deep trust is literally the only environment where we can be our true, authentic selves without wearing a mask. We can just exhale and be us.
In terms of stress reduction, think about how totally exhausting it is to constantly wear heavy emotional armor, to always be on the defensive. Trusting relationships mean we finally get to drop that armor, which directly and measurably lowers our daily anxiety levels. Socially, trust massively increases cooperation, leading to deeper friendships and way more effective teamwork. And finally, the neurological rewards are just immense. When you take that leap of faith, and that person actually proves trustworthy, your brain rewards you with a massive rush of oxytocin and dopamine. You know that warm, incredibly grounding sensation you get when a friend keeps a secret? Or that huge sigh of deep relief when confiding in a partner? That isn't just a mood swing. That is a potent chemical cocktail of positive feelings reinforcing social bonding. It's your brain's way of screaming, yes, this connection is absolutely vital for us.
So the crucial point is figuring out who actually deserves this biological leap of faith, right? How do we bypass the amygdala's alarm system safely? That brings us to Section 3, spotting the warning signs.
Before we look at the bad stuff, let's clearly define the good. When you're trying to figure out if someone is safe, you want to look for these 5 foundational traits in their daily behavior. First is authenticity. This simply means their daily actions actually align with their stated words. They walk the walk. Next up, consistency and reliability. This is a big one. This means they don't just show up when they need a favor from you, they text to check in on a random Tuesday just because. They are dependable across different situations, good and bad. Then we have empathy. Do they actively listen and validate your feelings? Or do they immediately dismiss you, or somehow magically shift the spotlight right back to themselves? And finally, honesty. Look, this means far more than just not telling lies. True honesty is the willingness to look at you and say, you know what, I messed up, rather than shifting the blame or trying to hide their mistakes. You are actively looking for people who embody these traits not just once, but over a sustained period of time.
Now, contrast those healthy, slow-building foundations with our very first major warning sign, rushing intimacy. You might have heard the modern terms for this, like love bombing in dating or friendship bombing. We have all met that person, right? The one who wants to be your absolute best friend, your soulmate, or your closest confidant literally 5 minutes after meeting you. Someone who demands immediate trust or pushes for rapid emotional intimacy way before you are truly ready is waving a massive neon red flag. And why is this so dangerous? Well, people who demand immediate trust are often trying to intentionally bypass your natural, healthy vetting process. They want to rush past your defenses so they can quickly establish control or start extracting favors. Remember, healthy relationships develop at a comfortable, natural pace for both parties. There is no pressure. If you ever feel rushed, it's your cue to take a giant step back.
Another absolutely critical warning sign to watch out for is how a person handles your personal boundaries. Someone who repeatedly ignores boundaries you've clearly set shows a fundamental lack of respect, period. Think of the person who guilt trips you to stay out for just one more drink. Come on, don't be boring, when you've clearly said you have an early morning and need to go home. Or the colleague who casually dumps an hour of their work on your desk at 4:55 p.m. on a Friday. Those are boundary violations. Furthermore, pay deep attention to your own intuition. We always talk about gut feelings, right? But a gut feeling isn't magic. It's actually your brain brilliantly processing thousands of subtle, subconscious cues that your conscious mind hasn't even fully registered yet. If a person continuously dismisses your instinctive discomfort, or worse, makes you doubt your own perception of reality, those are huge red flags you absolutely shouldn't ignore. Proceed with extreme caution.
Okay, moving into Section 4. Now, what's really amazing about this next part is that we don't just have to rely on guesswork or pure intuition anymore. We can actually use a strategic, evidence-based framework to safely test the waters. Let's walk through 5 steps to safer trust.
Step 1 is all about the incremental approach. A lot of us think trust is an on or off switch, but it's really not. It's more like a volume dial that you turn up very slowly. You start with low-risk sharing. A perfect example of this is telling a new friend about a minor, kind of funny annoyance at work. If they immediately go and gossip about that to someone else, well, you've only lost a very minor, unimportant piece of information, but you have gained massive, invaluable insight into their true character. Next, you ask for tiny favors to collect more data. Do they actually follow through? Do they respect confidentiality? If they consistently pass these small, low-stakes tests, then and only then, you can gradually dial that volume up to moderate vulnerability. You're safely gathering hard evidence of their trustworthiness before risking your deeper emotional safety.
Next up, steps 2 and 3. These require us to be highly active participants. We can't just sit back. We have to clearly articulate our own boundaries. And once you set a boundary, step 3 is observation. Practice active listening. But while you do, carefully observe if the other person actually listens to you. This is where a concept called ego suspension comes in. We all know a bad listener, right? That conversational narcissist who responds to your story about having a terrible day by immediately telling you how their day was actually so much worse. That is the exact opposite of ego suspension. You want to look for mutual validation. Listen, they don't have to perfectly agree with every single thing you say, but they absolutely must acknowledge the legitimacy of your feelings without making the entire conversation about themselves.
For step 4, we need to zoom out a bit. We need to monitor their intentional actions over a longer period. Let's be real. It is remarkably easy for anyone to be perfectly trustworthy for one afternoon. But what about over a month or a year? Track their day-to-day reliability and really watch how they take responsibility for their mistakes. Genuine intention matters far more than perfection. Nobody's perfect, but do they actually make amends and adjust their behavior moving forward? And crucially, this is the big one, observe their crisis behavior. Heavy pressure strips away the social mask and reveals true character like nothing else. Watch how someone reacts when the waiter gets their dinner order entirely wrong, or when a flight gets delayed by 3 hours. Do they regulate their emotions and try to look for solutions, or do they immediately lash out and scream at the nearest available target? That stress response, that reveals their truest baseline.
And that brings us to step 5. It's perfectly encapsulated by this famous proverb which was actually popularized by Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. This concept is literally the ultimate bridge between our primitive, fear-driven amygdala and our modern, logical adult brain. Building a healthy connection doesn't require you to just rely on blind faith or throw all your caution to the wind and hope for the best. It grants you full permission to be open and vulnerable without feeling like you're being foolish. It's a dynamic, ongoing process of extending just a little bit of trust and then verifying with real evidence that your trust was placed in good, safe hands.
Now, this daily practice of verifying, that is called discernment. Discernment is that wonderful, highly effective sweet spot sitting right between paranoid suspicion on one side and naive gullibility on the other. It means you are balancing openness with caution. You approach new relationships with hopeful realism, you actively gather information, and you honor your intuitive responses. Think of discernment exactly like a muscle. It gets stronger, quicker, and more refined every single time you use it. It acknowledges that, honestly, most people aren't entirely 100% trustworthy or 100% untrustworthy. They exist somewhere on a constantly shifting spectrum. Practicing discernment allows you to gently remain open to all those beautiful biological benefits of connection we talked about earlier, while safely and smartly protecting yourself from exploitation.
All right, section 5, trust in the real world. Let's look at how to actually deploy this framework out there in the wild. Applying all this to different contexts obviously requires tailoring your strategy. For example, in the workplace, you don't just hand a brand new colleague the login credentials to your biggest, most important client account right away. That's crazy. You begin by delegating a small task, maybe drafting an email or preparing a minor presentation, and you observe. When they actually meet that deadline, think about that immense feeling of relief. That one small act paves the way for a highly collaborative, low-stress partnership. Now, with family, maybe you start by sharing a moderate vulnerability. Then you observe whether they offer judgment-free support or if they jump straight to harsh criticism. In your social life, maybe you gradually reveal mildly embarrassing personal stories just to see if they remain entirely confidential. Genuine trust is always built through a series of these positive, quietly observed interactions over a long period of time. It is never built through one dramatic leap. All right, we have covered a ton of ground today. From your amygdala's primitive alarm bells trying to protect you, all the way to the practical daily muscle of discernment. Because trust is a skill, one that takes continuous practice, self-reflection, and occasional reassessment, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to apply to your own life right now. Look at your existing relationships. Identify just one person where you'd like to build a little more depth. Keeping your boundaries perfectly clear, who will you take a small, safe step of trust with today? Because while a life without trust might feel totally safe, a life with trust is truly the only one worth living. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I wish you the absolute best of luck as you get out there and build deeper, safer connections.